My husband mocked my career. Then he discovered I earned more than his whole family combined, and the truth shattered his pride forever. My husband used to laugh whenever I mentioned work. He would roll his eyes, call my career a cute little hobby, and joke to his friends that I only did it to feel important. At first, I swallowed the humiliation. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. But deep down, every careless word he threw at me built up like a storm. I was working silently, building something real, something powerful. He didn't see the late nights, the endless phone calls, the deals I was closing while he sat in front of the TV, convinced I was beneath him. I still remember the day it started to sting in a different way. We were at his parents' house for dinner, and his uncle asked what I did. Before I could answer, my husband smirked and said, "Oh, she just plays on her laptop all day. You know, keeps herself busy." Laughter echoed around the table. My cheeks burned, but I smiled politely, because that's what was expected. Inside, though, I made myself a promise. I would never give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. He wasn't always this way. When we first met, he admired my ambition. He said he loved how independent I was. But the moment we got married, it shifted. It was as if my success threatened him, even before it was visible. He wanted me to stay small, quiet, unthreatening. And I pretended to oblige, even as I worked harder than ever. The irony. He thought I was losing myself, when in reality, I was building the kind of empire he couldn't even imagine. And the day he found out, completely by accident, was the day his world started to crumble. It happened on a Sunday morning, one of those lazy days when he sat in his pajamas, scrolling through his phone, sipping coffee, like he owned the world. He casually asked me to transfer some money to cover his younger brother's car repair. His tone was dismissive, like it was obvious I had nothing better to do than play secretary for him. I didn't even argue. I just opened my laptop and logged into my business account. That's when he leaned over, probably expecting to see a couple of $100 at most. Instead, his eyes froze. The screen showed numbers he couldn't process right away, commas in places he didn't think were possible for someone like me. His jaw tightened. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, and stared again, as if maybe the bank had made a mistake. What is this?" he finally asked, his voice trembling in a way I'd never heard before. "My account," I said simply, keeping my tone calm. "The one from my work, that little hobby you keep mocking." He didn't answer immediately. He just sat there, silent, processing, his face pale. For the first time in years, I saw something I thought he'd never feel toward me: fear. The silence stretched until he finally muttered, This can't be right. How much is this?" I looked straight at him. "More than your whole family has ever earned. Combined." And I wasn't exaggerating. His father's pension, his mother's savings, his siblings' jobs, all together didn't come close to what I had built in just a few years. That was the moment his laughter died, replaced by something darker. He tried to laugh it off at first, that nervous chuckle people use when they're scrambling for control. "Come on," he said, forcing a grin. "You're joking, right? You can't actually make this kind of money, doing what you do." I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. "I can. And I do. That's why I never asked you for a cent. That's why I never complained when you mocked me in front of your family. I was too busy proving you wrong." His face shifted from disbelief to anger. "So, what? You've been hiding this from me? Lying to me?" "No," I said firmly. "I told you I had clients. I told you I was growing. You just didn't want to believe me. That's not my lie. That's your arrogance." He pushed away from the table, pacing like a caged animal. "You're telling me, all this time, I've been the one bringing home the money, paying the bills." I cut him off. "Actually? No. You paid half the mortgage, half the utilities. And you know what? That's less than I've covered on my own, without ever making a scene about it." The silence that followed was heavy. I could almost hear the sound of his pride shattering, piece by piece. He had built his identity on being the provider, the strong one, the man of the house. And now the foundation of that image was gone. Finally, he sat back down, his voice low but sharp. "You humiliated me. You made me look like a fool." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "No, you did that all by yourself." That week, the shift in our house was undeniable. He stopped making jokes about my little hobby, but the silence that replaced them was worse. He'd come home later than usual, barely speaking to me, slamming cabinet doors as if the wood was to blame for his bruised ego. One evening, his mother called. I overheard the conversation from the kitchen. She asked if he'd help his sister with rent again, and he replied with irritation, "Ask her. She's the one rolling in money." He didn't even bother to lower his voice. For years, he kept my career small in their eyes, painting me as the dependent wife. Now he had flipped completely, shoving me into the role of provider he once mocked. When he hung up, he turned to me with that sharp look that could cut glass. "You should help them," he said flatly. "It's family." I set down my glass of water. "I already help. Quietly. Your mother knows the groceries I paid for. Your brother knows the loan I forgave last year. But I don't owe anyone here a lifestyle just because you can't face the truth." His fists clenched. "You think you're better than us now." I shook my head slowly. "I don't think I'm better. I just worked harder. And instead of mocking me, maybe you should have paid attention." The words hung in the air like smoke after a fire. He had no comeback, only a glare that told me he wasn't done fighting, just recalculating. The real explosion came a few days later, during Sunday lunch at his parents' house. Everyone was gathered around the table, his mother, his siblings, cousins, chatting loudly over roast chicken and wine. His uncle asked him about work, and he started bragging about some minor promotion he was expecting. Then, out of nowhere, he turned to me with a smirk. "And my wife," he said, raising his glass, "apparently makes more money than all of us put together. Isn't that right, honey?" The table went silent. Every eye turned toward me. My fork hovered in the air. He had never breathed a word about my career to them before. For years, he let them believe I was just his quiet, dependent wife. Now he was throwing me under the spotlight, not to celebrate me, but to humiliate me. His mother frowned. "What's he talking about?" I forced a polite smile. "I run my own company. It's been doing well." His brother laughed bitterly. "Doing well? He said you're making more than all of us combined. Is that true?" The air grew heavy. My husband leaned back, eyes gleaming with something between resentment and pride. He wanted them to feel as small as he suddenly felt. He wanted me to take the heat. So I met every gaze at that table and said calmly but firmly, "Yes, it's true." Gasps. Whispers. His mother pressed her hand to her chest as if I'd confessed a crime. And my husband, he smiled, but it wasn't joy. It was the twisted satisfaction of dragging me into a storm of his own making. The questions came fast, sharp, almost accusing. "What kind of company?" his cousin demanded. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" his mother asked, her voice shaking. "Are you hiding money from the family?" his brother added, half joking but with real bitterness in his tone. I held my ground. I didn't hide anything. I worked. I built something. I didn't talk about it because every time I tried, I was laughed at, including by your son. The room went still. My husband's smirk faltered. His family shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, but no one rushed to defend me. They weren't angry that I had succeeded. They were angry that I had done it without them, without their permission, without fitting into the little box they had built for me. Finally, his mother spoke, her voice cold. "Well, if you're doing so well, maybe you can finally contribute more. Your husband has carried this family long enough." I almost laughed. Carried? He had leaned on me for years while mocking me to everyone else. But I didn't lash out. I just looked at her steadily and said, "I've already been contributing. You just didn't know it." I saw the realization sink in piece by piece as they replayed every unexplained gesture, bills paid, sudden relief in hard months, small favors they assumed came from him. It was me, always me. And across the table, my husband sat stiff, his pride in tatters, realizing that by exposing me, he had also exposed himself. That night, the tension followed us home, like a shadow. He barely spoke during the drive, his hands gripping the steering wheel, so tightly his knuckles turned white. When we finally walked through the door, he slammed it shut and turned on me. "Do you realize what you did?" he hissed. "What I did?" I repeated slowly. "You threw me to the wolves. You outed me to your family, not to celebrate me, but to make yourself feel better. And now you're angry because they know the truth." He started pacing, his words spilling out like poison. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. They were looking at me like I'm less of a man because of you." I crossed my arms, steadying myself. I didn't humiliate you. You did that the moment you mocked me for years while I built something real. All I did was stop hiding." He stopped and glared at me. "You don't get it. Men are supposed to provide. That's how it works. Now they'll think I'm weak, that I can't take care of my own wife." I stepped closer, my voice firm. "Maybe it's time they stop thinking of me as someone who needs to be taken care of. I'm not your child, and I'm not your shadow. I'm your wife. Or at least I was supposed to be." The words hung between us, heavy and dangerous. For the first time, I could see it clearly in his eyes. Not love, not partnership, but raw resentment. And I knew then this wasn't just about money anymore. In the days that followed, his resentment curdled into something uglier. He didn't joke anymore, he mocked with venom. Every time I walked into the room with my laptop, he muttered under his breath, "There goes the boss. Don't forget us little people. Maybe I should just quit my job since you've got it all covered." At first, I tried to ignore it, but the bitterness was seeping into every corner of our lives. Meals together became silent battlegrounds. Nights in bed felt like lying next to a stranger. Then one evening, I overheard him on the phone with his brother. His voice was low, but not low enough. "She thinks she's better than me now. Better than all of us. Just wait. She won't last. These things never last." Something inside me snapped. It wasn't just that he doubted me. It was that he wanted me to fail. He needed me to fail to restore his pride. And that realization hurt more than all the jokes, more than the mockery, more than the silence. When he hung up, I walked into the room and said quietly, "I didn't marry a competitor. I married a partner. At least I thought I did." He looked at me with tired, angry eyes. "I didn't sign up to be second place in my own marriage." I held his gaze. "Then maybe you shouldn't have treated me like I was never in the race." He didn't answer. He just turned away, leaving me in the doorway with the chilling awareness that something between us had cracked beyond repair. The breaking point came sooner than I expected. A week later, his family hosted another gathering, this time for his sister's birthday. I debated not going, but part of me wanted to face them head on. When we arrived, the whispers started immediately. His aunt leaned in close to me and said, "So, when are you going to buy the family a new house?" His brother chimed in, "Or maybe a car for me, since you've got more than enough." They laughed, but their eyes weren't joking. I glanced at my husband, waiting for him to step in. Instead, he just smirked, enjoying how they were turning on me. He had thrown me into the fire, and now he was watching me burn. I stood, glass in hand, and said calmly, "I've already given more to this family than you realize. But let me make one thing clear, my success is mine. I don't owe anyone here a cent, least of all your approval." The room fell silent. His mother gasped as though I had committed some unthinkable sin. My husband's face turned red, not from shame, but from rage. On the drive home, he exploded. "How dare you talk to my family like that? You embarrassed me again." I turned to him, my voice steady but cold. "No. What embarrassed you was the truth, that your wife isn't a joke, and you can't stand it." He gripped the steering wheel, so hard I thought it might snap. He didn't reply, but the hatred in his silence said enough. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I knew it. The man I married wasn't coming back. And maybe he never really existed. The next morning, I made my decision. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at the man who once promised to love me for who I was, not for what I could or couldn't provide. He looked tired, bitter, like someone who had lost a battle he never should have been fighting. "I can't live like this anymore," I said softly. He glanced up, confused. "Like what?" "Like I'm your enemy," I replied. "I worked hard, and instead of standing beside me, you've tried to drag me down. You mocked me, then you hated me for proving you wrong. That's not a marriage. That's a war." For a moment, I thought he might fight for us. But all he did was shake his head, muttering, "You ruined everything." "No," I said, standing. "I just refused to stay small for you." I left that house with nothing but my laptop bag and my dignity. And as I walked into the sunlight, I felt something I hadn't in years: freedom. I built my empire in silence. And in silence, I walked away from a man who tried to keep me invisible. The difference now was clear. I didn't need his approval, his validation, or even his love. I already had everything I needed because I had myself. And that was worth more than his whole family combined.